Alright, settle down, you historical masochists. Because your favorite midnight meme. Historian is about to drop some truth bombs so potent, they make your ancestors spontaneously combust with embarrassment. You think being a Viking warrior was all horned helmets and epic longboats, pillaging and feasting in Valhalla with your buddies? Please! That's a TikTok trend for people who think having a beard makes them tough. The reality was a squalid, disease-ridden existence, where you are more likely to die from your own bodily fluids than from some glorious axe wound. Which, let's be real, is a far less impressive epitaph than fell bravely in battle, isn't it? Stop scrolling, because I'm about to ruin every romanticized notion you ever had about those Norse bad. Spoiler alert. Their lives were an absolute dumpster fire of unspeakable filth. And death came for them not with a sword, but with a persistent, oozing rash. You probably think you're tough because you survived a Monday morning without coffee. But these folks navigated a world that made a modern public restroom look like a sterile operating theater. And nobody was getting an iced latte after their raid. You soft malin. First up, let's talk hygiene, or the absolute hilarious lack thereof. Forget your fancy Oral-B, your fluoride, your minty, fresh breath. Vikings, bless their rotten little hearts, had teeth that resembled a graveyard of neglected tombstones. Sure, some historians try to tell us they had bone toothpicks and some rudimentary tooth-cleaning rituals. Yeah, right. I had a friend in college who cleaned his apartment by opening the window for 5 minutes, and it still smelled like a fungal colony hosting a frat party. These guys were gnawing on Gracellin bread that probably had more pathogens than a petri dish in a biolab, so naturally, their mouths were a festering portal to a bacterial apocalypse, which makes you wonder if dragon breath was a feature or a bug. Imagine trying to woo a shield maiden with a smile full of black, crumbling stumps and breath that could curdle milk from across a fjord. Holy shit. Really? We're talking about chronic infections that would spread to their jaws, their brains, turning a simple cavity into a one-way ticket to Valhalla. Though, probably the one with the really bad Yelp reviews. One bad toothache and you're not sacking Paris. You're just silently praying for Odin to take you before the pus finally reaches your optic nerve. Because that's not how anyone wants their heroic saga to end. Is it? And bathing? Oh, sweet summer child, the concept of a daily shower was as foreign to them as a reliable Wi-Fi signal. Historians claim they bathed on Saturdays. Saturdays? That's 1 day a week to wash off 7 days of sweat, grime, animal dung, and whatever mystery fluids they picked up during a raid. My mom used to tell me I smelled like a wet dog after playing outside for an hour. Imagine 7 days of that, plus the distinct aroma of fermented fish and unwashed wool. No wonder their enemies just ran away. It was probably a tactical retreat from the stench, not from their battle prowess, right? Their clothes, mostly wool and leather, weren't exactly heading to the dry cleaner every week, either. These garments were basically mobile ecosystems, breeding grounds for lice, fleas, and all sorts of delightful parasites that made their skin a walking, itching buff. I can see you in the comments already, but they were tough. Yeah, they were tough until they got typhus from scratching a flea bite too hard. Then they were just another lump on the ground, indistinguishable from a particularly hairy sheep. And let's be honest, those lice had a better life expectancy than most Vikings. Beyond the skin-crawling reality of their personal hygiene, let's pivot to their diet, which was less paleo and more puke. While they did eat meat, fish, and some grains, their food preservation methods were about as sophisticated as a toddler's understanding of astrophysics. We're talking salted, smoked, and fermented everything. Which sounds exotic until you realize fermented often meant slightly rotten but still edible if you were desperate. Which they usually were. Imagine a food safety inspector from 2025 showing up to a Viking feast. They'd probably just declare the entire village a biohazard zone and call in the hazmat team. Because that's not a meal, that's a dare. Food poisoning was probably a daily lottery. One bite of slightly off meat, a swig of water from a contaminated stream and boom! You'd be suffering from a bout of explosive dysentery that would make a modern Taco Bell run look like a gentle cleanse. Try raiding a monastery when your intestines are staging a full-scale rebellion, because that's a tactical disadvantage your sagas conveniently omit. isn't it? And speaking of water, clean drinking water was a myth, a fantasy, a unicorn fart in the wind. Ponds, rivers, rain, barrels all shared with animals, all teeming with microscopic horrors just waiting to colonize your gut. We complain about tap water these days, but at least ours isn't actively trying to turn our insides into a science experiment. So, count your blessings, you pampered hydration enthusiasts. Now, let's talk about the unsung hero of Viking mortality. The elements. You want to talk about tough? Try sailing across the unforgiving North Sea in an open boat with no Gore-Tex, no heated cabins, just a few animal hides, and the sheer, unadulterated cold seeping into your bones. Frostbite was a Viking's least glamorous battle scar, often leading to amputations performed by the local healer whose surgical tools were probably sharper on a good day than a butter knife on a bad one. One wrong gust of wind, one hidden reef, one rogue iceberg, and your longboat became a very cold, very wet coffin, which is less epic sea voyage and more natural selection with extra steps, isn't it? Then there were the animals. Oh, the animal. We lionize their bravery against human foes, but what about the invisible armies of ticks, fleas, and other delightful creatures that carried diseases like Lyme disease or various forms of insect? One bite from a disease-carrying rat in a damp, overcrowded longhouse. And you're not raiding anymore? You're just shivering in a corner, hallucinating, and waiting for the sweet release of death. It's like a prehistoric version of a bad Airbnb experience. Only the bedbugs are carrying the bubonic plague. And the host isn't responding to your complaints because that's just how life was. You oversensitive Yelp reviewers. Speaking of longhouses, these were essentially communal petri dishes. Entire families, often including their livestock, lived in a single, poorly ventilated space. Imagine the constant coughing, the sneezes, the aerosolized pathogens mingling with the smoke from the central fire. Tuberculosis, pneumonia, influenza. These weren't just bad colds. They were Viking death sentences. It's like living in a permanent, high-stakes game of Plague Inc. And you're always the asymptomatic carrier, which makes you wonder if social distancing was an unheard-of luxury or just utterly futile, doesn't it? And don't even get me started on their medical practices, which made modern TikTok health advice look like cutting-edge science. If you broke a bone, they might try to set it, or just let it heal crookedly, making you a permanent member of the Limp and Suffer Club. Infections. They'd probably try to bleed you or apply some dubious poultice made of mud and It est like a medieval version of DIY surgery from a YouTube tutorial titled How to Amputate Your Own Arm with a Dull Axe. No medical training required. Because that's a guaranteed way to accelerate your trip to the afterlife, isn't it? Seriously. A paper cut could become a gangrenous horror show in 3 days flat. Their understanding of germs was precisely zero, which meant every wound, every scrape, every splinter was a potential portal for infection. You survive a brutal raid, narrowly escape an enemy's blade, only to get a nasty splinter from your own wooden shield and die a week later from sepsis. It's like winning the lottery and then choking on the champagne cork. Truly peak Viking tragedy, if you ask me, and a grim reminder that fate has a twisted sense of humor. Let's shift gears to the delightful world of Viking law and order, which was less justice system and more organized chaos with extra bloodshed. Blood feuds were practically a national pastime. Someone wrongs your family? You don't call the cops. You grab your axe and go visit their family. This wasn't about upholding the law. It was about keeping a meticulous score of who owed whom a head, which sounds a lot like a particularly aggressive fantasy football league, doesn't it? So you might survive a raid, avoid the dysentery dodge. The frostbite! But then your drunk uncle insults Olaf's sister at a feast, and suddenly you re-caught in a generational war that will end with someone's intestines decorating the longhouse wall. It's the ultimate butterfly effect. A poorly timed joke leading to the complete annihilation of your gene pool, and you wonder if they ever thought about just sending a strongly worded letter, because that would have saved a lot of lives, wouldn't it? And speaking of drunk uncles, their alcohol consumption was legendary. Mead, ale. They drank it like water, which, given the quality of their water, might have actually been safer sometimes. But the downside, drunken brawls, accidental falls, drowning in a puddle after a particularly raucous night. It's like a continuous spring break with axes, only with more long-term consequences than just a bad tattoo. And a regrettable decision, which makes you wonder if they ever had hangovers so bad they swore off drinking for an entire week. Let's not forget the existential dread. These people lived in a harsh, unpredictable world, constantly fearing raids from other Vikings. Unpredictable weather, and the ever-present threat of famine. This wasn't a world of wellness retreats and therapy sessions. If you were feeling depressed, you probably just got told to man up or go raid something, which is not exactly a holistic approach to mental health, is it? The stress of constant survival, the loss of loved ones to war and disease, the sheer brutality of their existence. It probably took a toll on their psyche that made modern burnout look like a relaxing spa day. Honestly, their mental health coping mechanisms probably consisted of more drinking and more fighting, a self-destructive feedback loop that ensured short, violent lives. It's like a particularly grim season of Survivor where everyone's constantly on edge. But instead of winning $1 million, you just get to die slightly later than your neighbor, which is not exactly an inspiring reward, isn't it? Midnight Meme Historian is here to tell you that sometimes the true horror of history isn't the grand battles, but the quiet, agonizing despair that haunted their daily lives. And the agricultural innovations? A riot. They relied on rudimentary farming techniques, which meant crop failures were a regular occurrence. One bad harvest, and entire communities faced starvation. It acts like a medieval version of a grocery store running out of oat milk. Except instead of a mild inconvenience, it meant everyone starved to death. We complain about inflation and food prices in 2025, but at least we're not gnawing on tree bark because the oat didn't grow, which makes you wonder if they ever considered a subscription service for their food. Because that would have been a game changer. Remember the glorious sagas where they discovered new lands? Yeah, they also discovered new ways to die while doing it. Navigational errors. Getting lost in unfamiliar territories. Encountering hostile natives who were too keen on surprise visitors from Scandinavia. All excellent ways to check out early. It's like a deadly game of Explorer Bingo, where every square means a gruesome demise. And nobody gets a consolation prize, which is hardly the kind of discovery that gets a documentary special, is it? Holy shit. Really? Moments continue to pile up when you consider the sheer absurdity of their engineering. Imagine building a longboat sturdy enough to cross oceans, yet not having a basic understanding of how to prevent widespread disease in your settlements. It acts like Jeff Bezos building rockets to Mars, but forgetting to install working toilets at Amazon warehouses. A testament to prioritizing grand, visible achievements over the mundane but life-saving realities, isn't it? Their priorities were about as clear as a swamp after a particularly violent storm. The sheer physical toll of their lifestyle was relentless. Constant manual labor, harsh winters, primitive tools, arthritis, chronic back pain, injuries that never truly healed. These weren't just discomforts. They were debilitating conditions that made them easy prey. A simple fall could mean a broken hip. And in a world without modern medicine, a broken hip was essentially a death sentence. It's like getting injured in a CrossFit competition and realizing your only treatment option is a shaman chanting over a goat skull. Not exactly ideal for a quick recovery, isn't it? And childbirth. Oh! The joys of medieval obstetrics! For women, pregnancy and childbirth were a roll of the dice, with terrifyingly high mortality rates for both mother and child. Infections were rampant. Complications were often untreatable. And pain relief was pretty much non-existent, unless you count a stiff drink and hoping for the best. It's like a live-streamed horror movie that nobody wants to watch, and yet it was a fundamental part of their existence, making you wonder if they had baby showers with less celebratory undertones, doesn't it? Even their famed warrior culture, the very thing that made them Vikings, was a double-edged sword. Constant warfare meant constant risk of death. Not just from direct combat, but from infected wounds, capture, or the sheer exhaustion of campaigning. You might escape the axe, but succumb to a slow, agonizing death from a festering arrow wound weeks later. It's like surviving a zombie apocalypse only to die from a paper cut. An anticlimactic end to a supposedly glorious life, and a stark reminder that even heroes have terrible immune systems. The Midnight Meme historian insists that this isn't just about roasting the past, it's about seeing the grim, hilarious reality behind the myths. These tough Vikings were dropping like flies from things that a modern toddler could survive. Measles, mumps, rubella, all things we vaccinate against. But for them, a childhood illness could decimate an entire generation. It's like a deadly game of Russian roulette. Only the bullet is a common cold, and everyone's playing, making you wonder if they ever had playdates where half the kids just didn't show up the next day. So, when you see those glorious depictions of Vikings, remember the truth. Their epic journeys often ended with them puking their guts out from tainted water, scratching themselves raw from lice, or dying from a tooth infection that would make a modern dentist faint. It's less Conan, the barbarian, and more naked and afraid with significantly worse dental hygiene. And a constant, low-grade fever, which is hardly the marketing slogan for a blockbuster movie, is it? And let's be real. Some of their political decisions were dumber than a bag of hammers. Kings and Jarls making alliances based on who had the prettiest daughter or the biggest boat. Only for those alliances to collapse faster than a tech startup after a bad IPO. It's like a medieval Twitter beef. Only with real swords and significantly higher stakes than losing followers because nobody was getting cancelled. They were just getting canned. If you catch my drift, it est. Almost like they had a council of advisors, who were all just a bunch of Yashmen, too afraid to tell their leader that invading a country with a vastly superior army and a raging plague simultaneously was a bad idea. Which sounds eerily familiar to some modern political masterminds, doesn't it? Like watching a certain former president declare he's going to build a one big beautiful bill act while simultaneously suggesting we inject bleach. You just stare in awe at the unwavering confidence in unadulterated stupidity. Honestly, their foreign policy often boiled down to, we want your stuff, so we're coming to take it. No complex diplomatic maneuvers. No UN resolutions. Just pure, unadulterated aggression. It's like a global game of mind played by heavily armed toddlers. And the consequences were absolutely devastating for everyone involved, especially the guy who owned the stuff. Which is a surprisingly accurate parallel to certain leaders today, who think international relations are just a bigger playground, isn't it? Midnight Meme historian says, sometimes the more things change, the more the underlying idiocy remains a constant. They'd spend months building a magnificent longship, a marvel of engineering for its time, only to fill it with guys who hadn't washed in weeks. Packed so tight they could practically taste each other's fear and then they'd sail for weeks across, freezing, open water, praying to Odin for safe passage, while simultaneously infecting each other with every known disease, from Scandinavia to the Mediterranean. It's like packing a cruise ship with unvaccinated anti-maskers during a pandemic and being genuinely surprised when half the passengers end up with something worse than a bad hangover. Which, let's be honest, is a tragically modern level of self-sabotage, isn't it? When you realize your empire is built on corruption and a chronic lack of basic sanitation. That's the real meme caption for Viking history, not some dude flexing with an axe. Their glory was built on a foundation of filth and disease. A testament to sheer stubbornness more than any actual strategic genius. They were basically the ancient world as equivalent of a pop-up store that looked cool on the outside, but was a biohazard on the inside. Which, let's be fair, sounds like half the online retailers these days. So, you think you'd be a mighty Viking warrior. You'd probably get a splinter in your foot, it would get infected, and you'd die of gangrene 3 days before your first raid. Which is less epic saga, and more Darwin Award candidate, isn't it? Or maybe you'd get the plague from a rat that snuck into your longhouse. And your valiant last words would be a wheezing cough, completely devoid of any heroic gravitas. It's like training your whole life to be an MMA fighter, only to trip on your shoelaces walking into the ring and break your neck. Just pure, unadulterated historical humiliation. Is it not? Now, here's where it gets absolutely fucking insane. Imagine a society so obsessed with honor and glorious death in battle, yet so utterly oblivious to the microscopic assassins literally eating them from the inside out. They'd fear a rival clan's axe, but not the invisible horrors lurking in every mouthful of stagnant water or every unwashed hand. It's like being terrified of sharks in the ocean, but happily swimming in a pool full of raw sewage. A complete and utter disconnect from reality, isn't it? This historical blindness makes modern leaders who ignore climate change while building bunkers look like scientific visionaries, because at least they acknowledge some external threat, even if their solution is hilariously inadequate. But wait, it gets worse. The sheer prevalence of parasitic infections. Tapeworms, roundworms, pinworms? These weren't just cute little critters. They were internal colonists, silently siphoning nutrients, causing chronic discomfort, and in severe cases, leading to malnutrition and organ damage. They probably just thought it was a price of being alive, another delightful symptom of their brutal existence. It's like having a permanent, internal tenant who never pays rent and constantly messes up your insides. And you can't evict them, which is a far less glamorous form of internal struggle than you see in movies, isn't it? Now, you're probably wondering what the actual fuck caused this level of medical and sanitary ignorance. I'll tell you in a minute. Part of it was simply a lack of scientific understanding, but another part was probably a cultural indifference to anything that wasn't immediate, visible, and could be solved with an axe. Smallpox, for instance, would sweep through communities like a TikTok dance craze, only instead of going viral for 3 days, it just killed everyone, and they had no idea why. It's like watching an entire generation fall for crypto scams over and over, because they just believe in the hype, even when all the evidence points to disaster. The sheer human capacity for ignoring inconvenient truths is truly timeless, isn't it? And the children? Think about the child mortality rates. It's heartbreaking, but also a stark reminder of how brutal life was. Kids probably didn't even make it to their 5th birthday half the time, succumbing to diseases that today are barely a concern. It's like a particularly dark episode of Kids Say the Darndest Things, where the darndest thing is just them not making it to adulthood, which is not exactly a feel-good segment. Is it? Midnight Meme Historian is here to remind you that the good old days were mostly just days that were good for dying. The Roman Empire fell because senators were too busy trying to figure out which lead-infused wine would give them the coolest hallucinations. Vikings just fell over from a bad shrimp cocktail and the clap. Their legacy is less about grand strategy and more about who could survive the most stomach-churning bacterial onslaught, which is a much less inspiring story for a Marvel movie, isn't it? And speaking of legacies, how many of them actually achieved some great, lasting fame? Most were just anonymous grunts who died cold, wet, and probably covered in their own vomit. Like a particularly sad rock concert attendee who peaked too early. So much for immortality, huh? Sound familiar? This casual disregard for collective well-being in favor of individual glory or short-term gains? We see it today, don't we? People refusing vaccines, ignoring climate warnings, prioritizing personal freedom over public health, all while getting their news from TikTok influencers who think essential oils cure everything. It's like a direct, unbroken lineage of human stupidity. From the Viking longhouse to the modern Facebook comment section, always confidently incorrect, always prioritizing immediate gratification over long-term survival, which makes you wonder if we've actually learned anything at all, doesn't it? So, next time you see some dude with a braided beard and a faux fur cape talking about his Viking heritage, just ask him if he's flossed today. Because the real Viking heritage isn't just about courage. It's about the courage to live in conditions that would make a modern sewer rat gag. And the bravery to face a death that was likely undignified, painful, and absolutely preventable, which makes you question the whole glorious death narrative, doesn't it? Now, for the ultimate opinion battle? Who was dumber? The Viking who died from a really bad tooth infection because he thought brushing was for cowards. Or the modern influencer who died trying a TikTok challenge because they thought getting likes was more important than basic physics. Vote tooth for Viking stupidity, or TikTok for modern idiocy in the comments below. Midnight Meme Historian wants to know if our ancestors or our contemporaries hold the crown for peak human foolishness. If you enjoyed watching dead people's bad decisions, smash that subscribe button faster than a Viking raiding an unguarded village. Because we've got more historical horrors to unpack, and trust me, it only gets worse. Hit the bell notification too, so you don't miss our next episode where we explore how Roman emperors made Trump look like a fiscally responsible genius. Because that S, a story that needs to be told, isn't it? We are Midnight Meme Historian, reminding you that history is a comedy of errors, and humanity is the punchline.